So I call the regular meeting of the Eugene School Board to order on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m. All board members are in attendance tonight. Here with me, we have Gordon Lafer, Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Alicia Hayes, Michelle Shu, Laurel O'Rourke, Judy Newman, and myself, Maya Rabasa. Please join Superintendent Dye as he leads us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Superintendent Dye. Now I will read the land acknowledgement. The Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 to 1855, and the subsequent removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It is important to note that all of Lane County was and continues to be an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayusla Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. First up on our agenda is an agenda review. Are there any questions, changes, or corrections to the agenda anyone would like to request? Okay, I don't see anyone's hands, so the agenda stands as is. Next up is an introduction of guests and the superintendent's report. Superintendent Dye, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members and listening audience. I appreciate you being here tonight in service to the community. Definitely a welcomed rainy few days, not a great deal, but a friend that we're all familiar with in the Pacific Northwest, and a sign that we're headed into fall, along with changing colors and full swing into the school year. The rain, I hope, was particularly helpful to our friends and neighbors in Oak Ridge that have really been dealing with some struggles associated with the fire. Way too frequent an occurrence in our area. And I hope that they know that we're here to support them any way that we can. Later this evening, I look forward to sharing with you how our district is going to support schools and the work that we do for students with families on making quality decisions. But before then, I just want to give you an update on some of the work that we're doing around our 3 big rocks. Nearing the end of our 100 chats, that I've scheduled have turned into a little over 110. And that's not at all a bad thing. After a little over 80 hours of hearing about the experiences of individuals within, connected to, or interested in our district, I'm really looking forward to taking some time to reflect on the themes that have emerged through those conversations and thinking about and working with people on our next steps for ongoing and intentional engagement. Those will definitely help frame our conversations about how to move forward with our Student Investment Act and our aligned guidance for other funding that we receive from the state for investments into our schools. In terms of equitable outcomes, tomorrow, you may know that the Oregon Department of Education will release statewide assessment data. While that information is embargoed until 6 a.m. tomorrow, we've seen some of it and there are no surprises there. We fully expect some of the trends that we've seen across the state and within our district as we come out of the pandemic. While the decline in many areas is noticeable across the state, our students have outperformed the state in all categories. There is still very important work to be done just the same. But that said, and no test can truly measure the whole student and how well a student is experiencing their school and how well students are experiencing themselves and their own personal growth. We know that in order for students to enjoy learning and thrive in our schools, they must be cared for. They must be mentally and physically and emotionally sound and feel as though there are caring adults around them. We know that if we pursue the work that we've started and that if we persist on those very important endeavors, that test scores will absolutely increase as a natural byproduct. Further, in terms of student and staff well-being, I want to really thank our associations for their collaborative efforts in figuring out how we're going to best use funds provided to us by House Bill 4030. While putting a dollar figure to the total contribution that our staff make is absolutely impossible, we hope that this compensation recognizes the incredible and difficult work you perform on a daily basis. And I really want to thank you. I look forward to the rest of the meeting, and thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent Dye. The next item on our agenda is items raised by the audience. The school board receives written comments by email at board@4j.lane.edu and also sets aside time in each regular board meeting to hear public comment. Community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting their request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment or by contacting the superintendent's office. This information can also be found on our website. The deadline is the Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. While community members are speaking, a timer will be visible on the screen and will beep to indicate that 3 minutes are up. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticism about district operations and programs. For complaints about individuals, the district has a board policy and complaint process. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7707 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. Tonight, we have 5 speakers who have signed up to speak. Lisa will welcome you in one by one.
Thank you. First, we have Larry Lewin, followed by Tom Peck. Larry, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. I'm Larry Lewin, retired 4J teacher, now a member of CAPE, Community Alliance for Public Education. Thank you, board members and Superintendent Andy, for this opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for your ongoing service to our community. Like many, I'm deeply hoping for a healthy school year for students and staff, and I'm sincerely hoping for a productive year for you board members. I know you have lots of issues to address this year, and I hope for quicker meetings with earlier finish times for your emotional and physical health. To that end, I won't use my full 3 minutes. With the start of the school year, unfortunately, comes the start of standardized testing. I've learned that the vast majority of standardized tests our students get are not mandated either by the federal government nor by the Oregon Department of Education, but by local districts like 4J. So 3 questions about testing. 1, when will the Easy CBM progress monitoring standardized tests begin in grades 1 through 8? I found out from the Oregon Department of Education this summer that these progress monitoring tests are strictly local school district decisions, not state or federal mandates. So it's up to the district to decide when and how to use these tests, if to use these tests. So question number 2, what do our teachers and principals in our schools say about the usefulness or lack of usefulness of the Easy CBM tests? Have you received any parent feedback on these tests or student feedback? And finally, question 3, are there any teachers or teams of teachers in our school buildings who are using alternative progress monitoring devices that they prefer? The types of assessments that work better for them in determining our students' progress. I know that 2 years ago, one of your annual board goals was reducing standardized testing for 4J kids. The pandemic, the superintendent search, and other serious issues pushed that goal aside. I urge you to revisit it this year and work toward finding better local measures than continuing to purchase commercially made standardized tests that currently dominate our assessment system. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, we now have Tom Peck, followed by Marion Malcolm.
Hello, my name is Tom Peck. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I want to speak on measure 114, which is the gun safety measure on the November ballot. We are seeking your support for this important measure to make our schools and communities safer from gun violence. This is an uncomfortable subject, but it is something that we all need to deal with. We are in a gun violence epidemic with mass shootings, homicides, and suicides on the rise. Gun sales have skyrocketed since 2014 with 400 million guns in the hands of civilians, more than there are people in the US. If guns were to make us safer, why are we by far the most gun violent country in the industrial world? We have had 475 mass shootings in the US, 6 in Oregon. Mass shootings grab the headlines, but homicides are even more frequent with many more victims. Suicides are getting even less attention in the media, but account for 82% of the gun deaths. Suicides are the leading cause of death of our youth in the United States, and second in Oregon. Over 500 Oregonians die each year from gun violence. The reason? We have extremely weak gun laws. We assume that there are gun laws to protect us. We assume that a person who wants to buy a gun needs to go through a thorough background check. But there's a big loophole that allows a person wanting to buy a gun, they can go demand the gun within 3 days, even though their background check is not completed. You may think a new gun owner needs safety training to own a lethal weapon. A licensed nail technician needs 241 hours of training. A new gun owner needs 0 hours of training. To hunt big game in Oregon, elk and deer, you can only have 5 rounds within your magazine and 1 in the chamber. To hunt humans, there are no limits to the number of rounds in your magazine. Am I through? The shooter at Safeway in Bend, Oregon had 3 magazines with 30 rounds each in it. Measure 114 will go a long ways in strengthening Oregon laws, and I believe there's another speaker that will explain Measure 114. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
We have Marion Malcolm, followed by Jim Jagger.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm a former educator. I'm the mother of someone who just left 4J after 25 years and the grandmother of a couple of kids in the North region. When I signed up to speak tonight, I wanted to appreciate something that I know that happened recently. And then after listening to the work session, now I want to appreciate a couple of different things. So the first thing I want to appreciate is that I understand that district leadership, including building level leadership, recently held a meeting with the parents of special ed students. And I think that's a really great step forward. I have a couple of grandkids who've been on IEPs, and even though they have rather assertive parents, I know that there was really a struggle for them to obtain the services that their kids were entitled to. So to know that the district is being very serious about listening to the parents seems to me to be a really, really good thing. I also sat in on the work session earlier this evening and listened as you all met the district's equity team. Is a big vibrant team doing vibrant work. And my own sense of how social change happens is that when there's a cadre of people going in the same direction and able to support each other, that's when things really start to happen. And what I heard from the people who spoke tonight from the equity team is a lot about how much they support each other, interact with each other, are becoming a family. And I think that means you're on a really good road. I appreciate that. Finally, I do want to ask a question. I know that you've got some new flexibility about how you use instructional minutes. And I think I don't know if I'm the only one who isn't aware what decisions you may have made or the district may have made about how to use those minutes. I do know I've heard from some people, including a student, that one thing they really like is a little more time between classes at the high school level, so that a student might have a minute to interact with a teacher after class, or that colleagues might be able to interact with each other. So I really hope that you'll take full advantage of the creative possibilities of the flexibility in those instructional minutes. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Jim Jagger, followed by Ezekiel.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Jagger, a lifelong Oregonian, father, grandfather, went to South Eugene High School, have a lot of roots in this area. I'm asking for your support by signing a resolution supporting Measure 114, which will make our state safer for all. Measure 114 has reasonable requirements, enhances the safety of the community at all schools. Almost 170,000 Oregonians signed the initiative petition to assure this will be on the ballot in November. I have 3 minutes. I want to make 3 points. I'm a co-author of the measure and really proud of what this can do with my neighbors and family and everyone who you know. Number one, 114 requires a permit to purchase a firearm, and with requirements. A, requires training, much like obtaining a driver's license, education and hands-on training. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? B, requires a completed, not just a requested background check like Tom was talking about earlier. I know it sounds ridiculous, but each year there's a risk to law enforcement who has to go out and retrieve firearms from persons who should never have had the firearm in the first place. This would correct that. Law enforcement is chosen after much great thought to be the applicant receiver. They're chosen because they have the resources to investigate, but they take that with responsibility. They're assigned a responsibility to affirmatively investigate to assure the applicant does not present a reasonable danger to the community or self. Checking social media, family contacts, things of that nature. Those bent on harming the community or others often broadcast their intent. Intelligence is not a prophylactic to depression and self-harm. As Tom was talking about with suicide, is something that is just, we don't talk about, but is that we need to talk about it. This pause to investigate will save lives of Oregonians, allowing time for reflection and preventative action by others. Almost 400 Oregonians each year have their lives ended by firearm suicide. Such heartbreaking stories all of us have heard. Measure 114 requirements would increase the chance of saving valuable Oregon lives. Number two, 114 assures a fair and non-discriminatory process. It enhances trust by requiring a decision within 30 days. If a denial then can't hide the reason, it must be in writing. You can appeal it and obtain a decision within 15 days from the local circuit court. How much more prompt and fair can a process be? Mass shootings and killings of the most vulnerable of us must stop. When there's a forced pause in mass shootings, it allows intervention and escape. In Sandy Hook, 11 children were able to escape. In Gifford, someone was able to take a cartridge, 2 people subdued the shooter. So if we reduce the amount of magazine size to 10, it forces pauses and allows for saving of lives. Lastly, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke with Shannon, what brings me to you. Shannon's a mother of a 3-year-old young girl, delightful young girl. And as I'm talking with her, we're talking about, I expected the conversation to be talking about she'll become president of the United States or something exciting. But instead, Shannon said, I'm afraid I send my child to school. You know, we shouldn't have people afraid anymore. We need to do everything we can to make sure that does not happen. I think one gigantic step is for us to support Measure 114. That'll make our state safer and make all of our neighbors and all of our families safer. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Jim.
And next we have Ezekiel. Go ahead, Ezekiel.
Hello, my name is Ezekiel Nieto Plesha. I go to Monroe Middle School. As you know, the name is from the 5th president, James Monroe. As I know that he had slaves, I feel like the name of the school should change to something a little bit more inclusive to all the people that go to my school and to other schools that I know have names from the past that have presidents that had slaves. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ezekiel. Thank you to all of the community members who took the time to share their statements with us and the community tonight. Next on our agenda are comments by employee groups. Tonight, we will be hearing from Sabrina Gordon on behalf of the Eugene Education Association.
Sabrina's coming in now. She'll be in shortly.
Thanks, Maya. Good evening, board and Superintendent Dye. My name is Sabrina Gordon. I am president of Eugene Education Association. And tonight, I just want to take a moment to express appreciation for some supports that are being provided to staff. The superintendent mentioned one of these earlier tonight, and that is the collaboration that has been happening between 4J and OSCA and EEA on the recruitment and retention grant funds provided by House Bill 4030. And similarly, there have been some collaborative efforts to create a safety net for staff who contract COVID but are out of sick leave. And while neither of these things really change our day-to-day jobs, don't make our day-to-day jobs any easier, we certainly encounter daily challenges in serving students. What these kinds of efforts do is create a feeling amongst staff of being recognized for the work that we do and supported and listened to when we raise issues and concerns. And those feelings really create a sense of optimism that we can work together to tackle challenges. So in our day-to-day work, when we encounter challenges, when staff are feeling supported by the district and by the school board, it's more likely that we're ready to dive in with all of our efforts and energy to do what we need to do for students. So just want to say thanks. It's a great way to start a new year of teaching and learning, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next on the agenda is comments and committee reports by board members. Does anybody want to go first? Judy, I see your hand. Thank you.
Great. I don't know that I've ever gone first. So thank you to all the speakers tonight. I really, really appreciated your comments. And to Sabrina, and it is exciting, the collaboration, and I'm really glad we could provide some retention help to our staff. So, but tonight I really wanted to talk a little bit myself about ballot measure 114, which is on the November ballot. I know you heard a lot about it tonight, and we'll be asking our 4J board to consider formally supporting the ballot measure with maybe a letter of support. I think what's in the measure, which you heard, is very relevant to school and our schools, and it really supports some of the values that we have articulated as a board. Specifically, and one of the things that that's impressive to me is there are about 9 other states that have similar requirements for gun ownership and purchase. And there were a couple examples of the data that these states experienced after they passed these laws and implemented these rules. In Connecticut, their homicide rates went down by 29%, and the gun suicides went down by 33%. Now, Missouri reversed having controls, and their gun violence went up by 47% and suicides by 24%. So I just think that sort of speaks for itself. But I wanted to point our attention to our board has a resolution that we passed in May 2019 concerning student and staff and school safety. And I just wanted to highlight some of the things in it, which I think really support why our board might want to look at this. Whereas gun violence on school campuses represents a particularly egregious and unacceptable threat to the lives of students, teachers, and staff across the country. Whereas the Eugene School District 4J Board Director supports the right of students and staff to attend schools that are safe and free from violence and harassment, especially life-threatening forms of violence. Whereas exposure to trauma can adversely affect a child's ability to learn and their health for the rest of their lives. And whereas most effective approach to creating safe school environments is a comprehensive coordinated effort, including school-wide, district-wide, community-wide strategies, which are supplemented with legislation, resources, and support at the state and federal level. Be it further resolved that Eugene 4J School District urges the state of Oregon and the United States Congress to implement common sense measures that prioritize student safety and environments in which all students have the opportunity to learn and grow. So I just encourage all my board members and of the listening audience, you can find the, look at this resolution, read it fully yourself concerning students, staff, and school safety. And when the legislative subcommittee is going to be meeting next week, we'll be looking at it and maybe draft a letter for you all to review and see if this board would like to support this measure. And I just want to add one last thing, and that is reminding people that Sunday, October 23rd, on a very different topic, in the morning at Alton Baker Park, EEF is hosting its first annual district-wide fun run and 5K run for supporting student success. So I would just encourage everyone to look at their website and register. And the money can either go, if a school has registered, it can go directly to your student's school, or it just can go to benefit students district-wide. So again, look it up, October 23rd. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Kirthi?
Hi, mine's not nearly as tangible action oriented as Judy's is. Thank you for doing the research on that. And I look forward to reviewing some of the stuff that you've put together and working with you on the legislative committee. I just wanted to say we, prior to this, were introduced to the new members of our equity team, and it was wonderful to see the work that has been put in to bring on new members for the equity committee at and the equity team at 4J, and I'm really looking forward to the new work that is going to be happening for 4J and for our district as a whole. I came back from a trip to the Middle East this past week, and it just kind of really brought some things to light for me. I was in a country where the education team at the national level was lamenting the state of their system, where a lot of the materials that they get in the country are actually from the US. So their students end up learning the American history and are actually experiencing sort of a cultural and identity loss and language loss within their own environment. And I was kind of actually thinking of how lucky we are in one sense that we live in a community that is supporting the development of identity-based education systems to a certain extent, and spending some time looking at materials and instruction and equity in a way that is actually supporting finding ways that students can find some joy in seeing themselves in the instruction and the teaching and learning environments that we have in. And I'd like to continue looking at ways we can do that. I think the equity team we have in place is a really great step in that direction. It made me feel grateful. It also made it very clear there's still the amount of work that has to continue in that direction. This isn't something that we just do once. And I think a colleague from EEA at one point referred to it as Chequity, and I don't believe in stuff like that. So I just wanted to say that I think that we are starting the year off in the right direction. I hope we continue in that direction. I think that we can do a better job of communicating some of the work that is being done across the district. I still, even as a board member, am feeling that there are disparate things happening in separate areas of the district that are still not coming together in a communication calendar in a way. I think, Andy, thank you for the board memos that you've been putting together and the Friday memos. They've been extremely helpful and consolidating these. But I would like to have the communities be a little bit more aware. And if we're not getting them, then I'm afraid some of the community members that don't have regular access to some of the communications are also not finding ways to be a little bit more available for some of the events and some of the activities that are happening. So anything we can do to help support that, I would be absolutely willing to take those actions and would take advice and direction from the superintendent's office to be able to help support those as well too. So I just wanted to start off in saying that thank you to the equity team for the work that you're doing, and be really looking forward to what this year is going to be bringing.
Thank you, Kirti. Alicia?
Thanks, Maya. First, thank you all for who spoke this evening. I will say that I have not got any committee reports because I haven't had a committee since the last time we've met. I haven't attended any committees. Couple things. One, thought there were 3 great questions posed to us about testing, and I hope we take time to delve into that. I know we're still making our plans for this year, but very important questions. Also, I absolutely support Judy's idea about moving 114 to the legislative committee and see what they bring us back, because I would love to be able to, as a board, support that and put our names forward on that. Not to shirk our duties, but to the young person who talked about changing the name of Monroe, actually, my understanding, and Superintendent Dye, I believe, has dealt with this. It is a principal's responsibility if you're going to change the name. Sometimes for schools get name changed, like Holt or Camas Ridge, because they bring 2 schools together and they get a new name. But I believe if you actually change the name of an existing school, that isn't the school board. It's the leadership of the school. Although Andy might be going, no, you're wrong, but that's my memory. So I just wanted to share that. I appreciate you coming forward and bringing that forward. I think it's a very important point. I know other schools have talked about different reasons for changing names, and I just think us explaining and making sure people put their effort in the place that our policies suggest, or we change the policies to suggest somewhere else. But those are my items for this evening. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you, Alicia. Michelle?
I've been meeting with district staff, and we're working on a more inclusive process to include student voices on the school board. We want to open applications to all students. We've been looking at what other districts have been doing successfully, and we're developing a new application, and we're looking to include input from our equity coordinators, affinity group members and advisors, and also student advocates and administrators. We are really looking forward to working toward centering student experience and voices, and having that advise what we do in the future and our decision-making processes. And we plan on having student representatives joining our meetings by next month.
Thank you, Michelle. Gordon?
Thanks. I also want to thank Ezekiel, the student from Monroe Middle School. Like Alicia, I think you raised an important point, which is that regardless of what other good things someone may have done, and regardless of whether their bad acts may simply reflect the ethics of the times they grew up in, having been a slaveholder is something that should disqualify someone from being honored by our school system. I know this is a somewhat complicated issue for some people, but I think Ezekiel is right. I appreciate his raising this, and I hope this is something we can address in the future. I also want to thank Larry Lewin for his comments about, again, what we've all talked about a lot, the need to cut back on standardized tests, and that one of the first steps we have to do on that is a survey conducted in collaboration with our teachers union to discover how much time is now being spent, I would say wasted in large measure, on preparation and administration of these tests. I believe we're finally going to do that this year and look forward to that happening. I was also happy to see and appreciate the notice from the superintendent, EEA and OSCA about the retention bonuses. And I also appreciated the superintendent's emails both to the board and to the community about the recent student deaths and suicides. I think nobody really has anything to say in response to something like that beyond the horror that everybody feels. But even just acknowledging that horror and acknowledging our obligation as a board to do as much as we can toward the goal that Laurel O'Rourke has repeatedly called for, a zero tolerance approach or zero tolerance goal to suicide. So I just appreciate the superintendent's leadership in articulating that horror, the pain, and the challenge we face. I also don't have committee meetings to report on, but I do want to report on the fact that this morning I was able to join people at Weyerhaeuser who were on strike in Eugene and Springfield. Weyerhaeuser is one of the largest corporations in America, and this year it bragged to shareholders that it raked in record profits of almost $3 billion. These profits were made off of Oregon trees and on the backs of Oregon woodworkers and millworkers. The people who are now on strike in Eugene and Springfield include both 4J graduates and parents of 4J students. In all our classes, I think, from kindergarten to graduating high school, we teach students about the importance of basic principles of fairness and mutual respect. If as educators, we then treat the disgraceful behavior of employers like Weyerhaeuser as something acceptable, we end up giving our students an education in hypocrisy, essentially saying that fairness is just something for inside the classroom. And furthermore, every study for the past 50 years have found that the thing that most strongly correlates with students' educational success is how much money their parents make. Normally, that's not something that a school district can impact in any way. And in this situation, we don't really control it either, but it is an opportunity for us to speak out. And I hope that all of us will speak out in support of the Weyerhaeuser workers now on strike. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I think that leaves me. There is a commonly held understanding that people will rise to the expectations held of them. I would argue the same is true for institutions, for ultimately institutions are made of people. It is up to those people to determine what shape and structure the institution forms for itself. What we hold on to and what we transform is in the hands of us, all of us, not just the board or district employees, but the entire community. If we hold low expectations, we cannot be surprised to see low results. Earlier today, the Eugene City Council received a report on a community survey issued by the city. In this survey, the community was asked about kindergarten through 12th grade education, K-12. The quality of local K-12 education, unfortunately, did not fare well in this survey. At first glance, the vast discrepancy between the gauged importance of quality K-12 education and the perceived delivery of quality K-12 education was dismaying. And it remains dismaying because the hopes of our community to deliver a quality K-12 education isn't just a desire, it is an absolute need. But here's the thing. This survey is also telling us that there is a powerful movement to be captured here. Quality education ranks amongst the top desires for our city. This means one half of this discrepancy between desire and delivery is the fact that our community holds high expectations for the delivery of quality education. We haven't lost hope because when hope is lost, expectations are lowered. And it is up to us to rise to these expectations. We expect nothing less of the individual practitioners working directly in our schools with our students. It is up to the board and district leadership to do the same in regards to this district as an institution. Just enough to get by is not an acceptable expectation. The meeting of minimum standards is not acceptable. The standards are truly ours to set. We can and will go above and beyond by holding our expectations high. While this is applicable to every single realm of district work, this notion of rising to expectations is directly related to a committee meeting I attended last week, along with board member Michelle Hsu. I'm so happy to share that after much anticipation and a stalled process last year, 4J's newly revamped Equity Advisory Committee met just this past week. We often, understandably, discuss educational inequities with a somber and defeated tone. We've been hearing proclamations of a commitment to addressing inequities for a long, long time. And we have been addressing them with lots of loud words and some quiet action, but that approach has left us in that space of somberness and frustration with little opportunity to see transformation. But there is reason to believe we are on the cusp of transformation. During our work session just prior to this meeting, we heard from our exponentially growing equity team, and the investment in this work feels incredibly promising. Alongside that team's work, and the care of community members like what we just heard from 4J middle school student Ezekiel Nieto Plesha, when I think back at the folks occupying the little Zoom windows of faces that comprise the equity committee, I'm struck by the power of this group making up this committee. From the students to the parents, community members, and staff, not only is this a collection of folks with tremendous experience and expertise to share, along with our equity team, this is a group of folks who I know will not settle for anything less than their highest expectations. And keeping in mind this is an advisory committee to the board and the superintendent, it is up to us, the folks who are the recipients of their advice, whether we rise to their expectations. I know I'm ready, and I expect my colleagues are as well. The next item on our agenda is the consent group, items for action. There are 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion? Gordon?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Okay. Motion to adopt the consent agenda is made by Gordon Lafer and seconded by Judy Newman. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand and keep it raised. Okay, I see a unanimous approval of the motion. Everyone has voted yes. Kirti Hasija Kaufman, Meyer Bassa, Alicia Hayes, Michelle Hsu, Judy Newman, and Gordon Lafer. The next item on the agenda is items for information. First item for information tonight is the Budget Committee application review and selection process. To give a little background for our newer board members and also for the community, I will just jump into a few of the details. By statute, each school district in Oregon has a budget committee composed of the school board and an equal number of district residents appointed by the board for a total of 14 budget committee members. The role of the district's budget committee is to hear the budget message, review the proposed budget, listen to comments from community members, then declare the tax rates and approve the budget totals to forward to the school board for adoption. The budget committee examines the annual budget proposal to ensure that the district is planning to spend money in furtherance of district goals. The committee reviews the proposed district budget, hears from the community, asks questions, and then moves it forward. And I'm emphasizing that point. By law, the budget committee members must reside within the school district boundaries and be registered to vote. District employees are not eligible to serve on the committee, and applicants do not need to be parents of students or have any other association with schools. The budget committee's appointed positions have 3-year terms staggered so that approximately 1/3 of members' terms expire each year. This year, there are 2 openings on the Budget Committee to be filled this fall. The terms of Budget Committee members Dakota Boulette and Juan Carlos Valle expired June 30th. They may apply for reappointment. The board has previously discussed possible adjustments to the solicitation, screening, and selection process for future appointments. And in fact, did make some adjustments last year, specifically regarding the information requested on the application and the modes in which one could submit their application. We need to decide if we would like to make further changes or keep the process as it stands. Whatever we decide, information about the Budget Committee openings and opportunity to apply will be posted on the district website in English and Spanish, shared on social media, and will be sent to local news media. The district also shares this in an email to all 4J parents and to more than 1,700 community e-news subscribers. The district is prepared to begin the process of accepting applications from community members interested in serving on the board's volunteer budget committee. As a board, we also, in addition to how we will do this process, need to decide on the time frame for this process. For reference, in past years, the first budget committee meeting was scheduled for December and served as an orientation, with the first regular budget meeting taking place in January. We are not obligated to begin that late, though we would likely not want to begin any later than that. With that said, I open it up to discussion, suggestions, questions. I forgot one point that we also need to take into consideration. This year, there is a new requirement that is linked to the, I'm going to forget the Senate bill. Is it 732? Is that correct? Which is the Senate bill that requires us to have an equity advisory committee to the board and to the superintendent. Part of this statute requires that we have one member that is a member of both the equity committee and the budget committee. We can handle that in a number of ways. I suggest that we continue to solicit applications to our budget committee and that we make a strong encouragement to our equity committee members to submit an application. We can also go the other route of asking budget committee members to become members of our equity committee. I believe I covered all of the information, but again, I will leave it open to questions. And I see, Judy, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Would you remind us, I know we did change the process and we had a very lengthy discussion, and I know we allowed people to apply in different ways, and we reviewed applications and then did interviews of some, or could you just review what the current process is? And then just a follow-up is, don't we have one member that's a member of both at this time? The equity and the budget committee? No.
We do not have a current member who is a member of both. I'm not sure if, Lisa, you have it handy to screen share the process from last year, but I can talk you through how I recall it, and maybe you guys can jump in that were part of it last year. So we altered the questions that we asked. We had it submitted in Spanish as well as English. I think that we could go farther with language if we choose as a board to request that. We shortened the questions and we eliminated some questions that were barriers to community members participating. And then we had an opportunity whereby after reviewing the applications, we were able to we heard statements, and those statements could take the form of whatever the person chose to share with us. And then we selected the budget committee members in a vote during a public board meeting. Does anybody remember any detail that I might have forgotten in that? Okay.
We did allow for alternative ways to submit, didn't we?
We did allow for alternative ways to submit. People could submit
a recording or
recording. I think we even joked in an accepting sort of way that if somebody wanted to do an interpretive dance, they could do an interpretive dance. We really wanted to make sure that all modes of communication were open and acceptable and honored. I apologize for using the word joke. It was something that we mentioned. So I guess the first thing we need to consider, and right now it's an item for information, I think the most important question is probably our timeline. Do we want to keep the same timeline, or do we want to move things forward a little bit more quickly? And then the next question is the format. Because it's September, we can bring this back in October. And in the meantime, we can have some time to, think deeply about how much we would like to alter the process and or alter the timeline, or alternatively stick with both. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or concerns or clarifications? Gordon?
I don't feel that strongly, but I feel like I'd rather do it quickly, that we have a good sense of this. And if there's a relatively quick and less time consuming way to do it, that'd be good. If somebody thinks something else is important, that's fine. But otherwise, that would be my preference.
Thank you, Gordon. Alicia, I see your hand too.
Thanks, Maya. A couple things. One, I appreciate that there's not a perfect way to do this. I know we've been talking about different ways. I think we should put some energy in to figuring out that piece about the equity. That seems to be something we have to do right away. What I appreciated last time was that there was an opportunity to get people's skills who write well. They got that part, and then the people who were more verbal, came and spoke to us. We kind of saw both sides of that. And so I appreciated that. So I also, when you asked why, I just want to verify, were you thinking of doing a earlier budget meeting, or were you kind of proposing, and I was trying to read what you put forward and it was really small on my phone. But so to me, it's also looking at staff and what they can be ready to do. I agree with you. I wouldn't want to go any later. I like doing the orientation in December and getting ready to go in January. But again, I would be checking with staff to make sure we give them ample time. So to recap, let's get a decision on the equity piece soon, because and I am fine doing things the same way we did last year, because I can't think of a better way. There's probably a better way, but I can't think of one. And we've looked at this from all sides. And I'm great getting started, just depending on what staff can do and can't do. Thanks.
So Alicia, I can answer one of those questions, which was directed at me. I don't have a preference for a timeline in terms of beginning meetings. I am remembering that the configuration of the budget committee last year was eager to have more involvement. And starting in January, that meant that we ended up really packing in our schedule. And that's my only concern, but it's not a concern that's trying to drive this decision per se. It's just a concern that I want people to keep in mind as we decide what to do. I do think that it's important to put some thought into the equity committee component. And so I agree with you on that one. And there's a couple of ways we can go about that. I see you're raising your hand, so please follow up whatever you wanted to say.
I'm just wondering, just an idea, throwing it out. Should we be talking to the equity committee about how they might want to, do they want to nominate somebody? It's just a thought, just came to me. Thanks, Maya.
That's a great suggestion for sure. And I am fairly confident we have another equity committee meeting prior to our next board meeting, because our next board meeting is the 12th and the equity committee meeting is like the first week of October. And I see Andy nodding. And Michelle. Okay, so that could happen, and that's a great suggestion, Alicia. Judy?
I know one of the things that I think I put forward during the retreat was to actually start the budget process earlier. So I like going faster just to be ready to go, even if it's the beginning of January, because of the desire of the budget committee, ourselves included, to just, have a deeper understanding and a way to really align our values and principles with funding. So I like that. I like asking the equity committee to appoint someone. And the only thing I would ask is that I would see in writing, and maybe it could come out in the Friday memo, just the process we use. So I really could see fully. I know we're piecing it together. I think we got most of it, but I'm not sure. I'm feeling like there might be one step missing. So, and the questions we asked. So I'd like to see that before we absolutely approve it. So.
Absolutely. Maybe Superintendent Dye, could we link last year's call for applicants in our Friday memo so that we have that at our fingertips?
Sure.
Thank you. Judy, are you all done? Awesome. Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I agree that starting earlier would be helpful because it's just an enormous amount of information to process, and time would be helpful. And if we can make it as equitable as possible, that would be fantastic.
I appreciate that concept of making it as equitable as possible. And I think we won't jump into it yet because I see Kirthi, but the next item on our agenda is hearing about decision-making. And I believe that we'll hear about how that can tie together, considering we'll be making a decision. And I think that the new model in place is a great place to inform us. Kirthi?
I 100% never thought I'd be this person. And this is like 2 meetings in a row where I'm like, do we want to put a timeline on this? So I'm going to ask that question. Like, do we want to put a timeline on this, since we seem to be at 2 things, which is one, we want to do this quickly and we want to do this right way. So, and I tend to work better with like deadlines. So I'm not sure if that's something we want to discuss right now, but I think it may be helpful. It's my very passive aggressive way of being like, please somebody put a deadline on it for me so I can plan accordingly.
I'm in agreement with you, and I might suggest that since we have a delay in our October meeting by a week, that we will have time to all put some thought into this, and we will get some information in the meantime. And typically we do an item for information, and it turns into an item for future action, and then it turns into an item for action. But if everybody is willing and there isn't objections, I would propose that we come prepared to make a decision on October 12th. So there would be our first deadline.
Okay.
Part of that deadline would be creating the timeline, which would mean the further deadlines.
All good.
We'll make a deadline to create the deadlines. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions, or are we comfortable leaving it that we will be linked to last year's process? We will take it to the equity committee to consult with them how they would like to handle this requirement, whether it's an appointment or the recommendation that we open up the equity committee to budget committee members, which is also a reasonable suggestion, and leave it to them to bring their first piece of advice to us, which is kind of exciting action. So if there's nothing else, we will add this to the agenda as an item for action, and we'll all come prepared to move and vote. All right. Without further ado, the next item on our agenda is what I just mentioned, which is receiving an update on the 4J decision makers and leaders team from Superintendent Dye.
Thank you. I would start by saying that this decision quality is not something that I'm bringing necessarily to the district. In fact, I was introduced to the decision quality model when I came to 4J after having been abroad. It's from the Decision Education Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization attached to Strategic Decisions Group. but the notion of making quality decisions is different, really getting the decision right. There are all kinds of things that we don't really have a high quality decision, but get the right outcome for one reason or another. And that doesn't necessarily make the process or the quality of the decision very strong. We just got the right decision. We as educators in the classroom, teachers and EAs throughout every department, in leadership ranks within buildings, departments, and in the Ed Center make maybe hundreds of decisions every day of varying degrees of importance. There's, daily quick decisions that are made, important decisions that may take up to, 2 hours or 2 days, and then strategic decisions that require considerable input or that warrant considerable input from a broad range of stakeholders. And one of the things that I've seen and some of the things that I've heard in my 100 chats is that there's a perception that there's not a lot of certainty about how some decisions are made and who's involved in making those decisions, who gets input in those decisions, and when brought to a table or a conversation about a potential decision, folks sometimes aren't certain what their role is when they're there. And that level of ambiguity just causes problems within the system, ultimately results in a lack of feelings of transparency or accountability or trust. And so while the decision quality model isn't something that I have brought to the district, I'm really trying to amplify it and spread it throughout the organization so that we all have a common language around how we're making decisions. And just a very brief discussion on the elements of decision quality. Think of it as a chain with 6 links, none of which are more or less important than the other. And the strength or quality of a decision is based on its weakest link. The first is a frame. How do we properly frame problems? I think that we as educators, you as members of the board, lots of people in the community, we're problem solvers and we see an issue and we do what we can to understand elements of the issue, and then we want to launch into a solution. We want to be problem solvers. But some of the problems that we face, many of the problems that we face are incredibly complex. And if we don't take the time to fully understand all the dimensions of a problem, then we could have a team of people, each with their own understanding of what the problem is, not integrated in their efforts and doing all that they possibly can, just not in unison. Then we have to have a shared set of values and have very clear, unambiguous language about what is it that we are trying to get out of the problems that are out of the solutions that we propose. And that takes an equally broad set of voices in the conversation. And then in order to adequately frame a problem and propose alternative solutions, you really need good information. And this speaks to something that Kirti said earlier. Good information doesn't come from a narrow group of stakeholders. Good information comes from having a broad set of voices, people that come into the problem space and help us understand what's going on and what might be, and get varying interpretations of the same thing. When we do that, when we engage more people in problem solving and decisions that the district has to make, there's a greater sense throughout the community that people know what's happening throughout our system. They're not just getting a newsletter, which is important. They're not just getting emails, which is also important, but they're being able to engage in the decisions that we make in a meaningful way so that they really understand the constraints, the possibilities. Those are 3: frame, values, good information. The last 3 is we have to use sound reasoning. Advocacy is a really good thing and something that we here in 4J and Eugene as a whole are very good at. We pride ourselves on advocacy for our students. But when you have slogans like, I just want to do what's best for students, we all interpret what is best in slightly different ways. And so you get a cacophony of advocacy that might not be working towards a solution in you. And we also have to identify very strong competing alternatives, which means that we need to come up with multiple solutions and see which of those solutions have the promise for getting most of our values with the least amount of trade-offs. And that doesn't come from a relatively small group of people in a closed door. And the last of the 6 elements of the chain is a commitment to follow through. And I don't believe it's lost on anyone on the screen or anyone in the listening audience, where we go to make a decision and a tremendous amount of effort is invested, a huge conversation, we make a decision, and then there's not a universal commitment to those involved in the process to follow through on that. And we begin to second guess ourselves. What we are trying to do is to engage multiple people in conversations and training about the process for decision quality, so that either as members of a work team or members of a decision board, we understand what it means to have adequately invested in framing a problem or adequately invested in gathering information. And this process itself ensures that the equity lens is used thoroughly leading up to identifying possible solutions, rather than something that we look at after a decision is made and we ensure that we've answered all the questions, because it's very easy for us to ensure that we have arrived at the right decision after the fact. I believe it's safe to say that all of us are guilty of that at some point. And it can be a very involved process, or it can be a fairly short process. But you need a diverse team of people that can serve on the decision team and on the work team. And that's where the folks that you met earlier this evening come in large part. In many organizations, school districts are no different. People are hired into leadership positions and believe that our job is to make the decisions and be decisive, gather some information and be decisive. And I know that that is required at times. I see the role that our leadership team plays here in the school district is ensuring that people are well aware of the criteria of a quality decision process, have the training, and are given a seat at the table. They're not asked to bring a folding chair. We have trained the regional equity coordinators as decision makers on the leadership team, invited members of OSCA and members of EEA and members of the board, and people who may not have traditionally been seen as those folks who would ultimately be making significant strategic decisions on behalf of the district. We also want to ensure that we have members of the working team, so to speak, who are out gathering information that are most likely to get engagement from sectors of the community that don't feel as though we hear what they have to say. May not have a sense of trust in us that we really will take their comments into serious consideration. So you will see over the course of the year, our efforts towards integrating decision quality into maybe not necessarily quick or daily decisions, because those are simply made at times and don't require a huge process, but important and definitely strategic decisions. It's not a flip of a switch. It's something that is a cultural shift in many ways. But you will absolutely see our efforts to broaden the constituencies that are sitting at a table when making decisions and evaluating the criteria for what is the best alternative. And there will be times at which the best alternative might not be the most popular. But we don't necessarily do service to our community by always taking the most popular approach to a solution. So there are some examples that I just want to point out that we have already begun to use the decision quality process on. I've mentioned a couple of times earlier in the year about the conversations that we'll have in coming months about the possibility of changing the secondary schedule. That could easily be made by a small group of people, but will absolutely result in a great deal of frustration and confusion and a lack of trust. So we have already begun to work with OSCA and EEA to frame conversations about how the process for changing the schedule will take shape. A longer conversation is about an equitable grading framework for our district. There is a group. There were a group of teachers this that engaged with Lane ESD to think about what might a more equitable framework for grades look like. What information do we need? I do believe that that is a long process with multiple iterations. You can't rush that, but we absolutely want to be confident that when we share a grade to a student, to families, to fellow colleagues, that we all understand what that's supposed to mean. And I think that grades are very important and held in very high regard to each educator, that absolutely protects the fierce autonomy that's part of education. With that in mind, we also need to make sure that we're communicating a clear and cohesive message to students and families. So how do we balance those two? That is a big decision. And the last is our SIA process. And the SIA process really now is referred to as integrated guidance. We want to make sure that our equity regional managers, that teachers in classrooms, that EAs in classrooms, that every sector of the community, and that students from all walks have a voice in the process as to how we use the investment dollars in our schools that are given to us by the state. It might be safer to listen to efforts of advocacy from multiple groups, especially in a community like ours, where there will be people with all kinds of wonderful ideas on what could and should happen, and they're all right. But it's not going to be possible for us to make bold moves and significant change if everyone gets a little bit of what we have. So there will be trade-offs, there will be conflict, and there will be risk. But by having people that are trained to understand the inherent risk in a decision and how to get good information and use reasoning and compare alternatives, I believe we'll come up with a quality decision process that's defensible, even if we don't get the outcomes that we want in every part of the decision. And so there's not so much a decision to be made here this evening, no pun intended, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of how we were responding to the desire to embed in a meaningful way the equity lens, how we were responding to demands that we have more voices at the table, and how we were responding to the expectation that decision-making will be predictable and transparent. But happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful. Anybody have any questions or comments or suggestions or what have you? Well, if you think of any in the meantime, you know Andy's email address. The next thing on our agenda is items for action. The first thing is to act upon recommendations from legal counsel. On September 7th of this year, the board met in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. I want to remind everyone that the discussion held in executive session is subject to confidentiality and cannot be divulged outside of said session. So please keep that in mind if you have any questions or if discussion is needed. With that said, would someone like to make a motion? I see Gordon's hand raised.
I know this is going to sound a little vague, but in order to respect the confidentiality of executive session, I would move that the board delegate authority to the superintendent in retaining legal counsel to participate in the multi-district litigation within applicable parameters of which the board approves. I can read that again or put it in chat or whatever people want.
I don't think you can put it in chat, but I see that Alicia has seconded it. If we need to have it repeated, we will have it repeated. But as of now, what Gordon said has been moved by Gordon Lafer. I'm not going to try to repeat it, but he can. And seconded by Alicia Hayes. Is there any discussion? Okay. In that case, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand and keep it raised. Okay, I see we are voting unanimously in favor of the motion. That would mean Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Ira Bassa, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Gordon Laper, and Michelle Shu have voted to approve this motion. The next item on the agenda is items for action at a future meeting. And the first item to come up is equity facilitation work. So the scope of the work was developed by the equity board representatives, and that's myself and Michelle, based on previous discussions held by the board and with the support of Chief of Staff Rob Hess. The request for quotes is being sent out. If you have individuals or organizations to whom you would like this request for quotes to be sent to, please email them directly to Rob Hess. I can go through the scope of the work that we developed, if you guys would like to hear that. But it is all based on the conversations we had. And what we would like to hear from you is what criteria you would like to see used in the selection of who would take on this work. Can I get head nods if you want me to go through the scope of the work so you can get an idea? Okay. So Judy, do you want to ask your question or should I go through the scope of the work first?
Well, I wanted, that was what I was raising my hand for.
Okay, great. Kirthi gave a head nod, so I saw that first. So the scope of the work includes one-on-one meetings with each board member and cabinet members to determine district needs and priorities around equity. Understanding the context of where we have been by reviewing documents we have created, reviewing policy, reviewing our equity lens, reviewing minutes and records of past board meetings. We are asking them to observe our monthly district equity meetings and understand the needs and priorities of that group. And we are asking them to provide equity coaching for board and cabinet members. And lastly, to provide equity training to the board and cabinet and district based on board goals and recommendations. Those were all based on the conversations that led to the resolution that we made at the end of last school year, when we decided that we wanted to hire someone or an organization, or perhaps a combination to take on this work. When we ask if you'd like to contribute criteria to what you would like to see used in the selection of who will take on this work, if you have ideas tonight, we're absolutely excited to take them down. We are also recognizing that this might take some thought and welcome that input to come in the form of email and or whatever you prefer. Judy?
Sorry, I didn't take my hand down. So I'd like to give it some thought and I'm happy to email them.
That would be very helpful. I appreciate that. And I want to reiterate that if anyone here has individuals and or organizations that you would like Rob to forward this request for a quote to, that you do so really at your earliest possible opportunity. Kirthi?
Yeah, same. I think I'd like to take some time too, but I was going to ask is like, I mean, have you and Michelle as part of this too also have ideas on people that you would recommend? I would love to have some of those suggestions too.
Yeah, what we could do is we could compile a list of the folks who Michelle and I are recommending and who the district has sent them to already as well. Just so folks can kind of keep an eye on who is receiving this request for quotes. If
Yeah,
that would be okay. And again, this work can be sent to folks who are local and that can be sent to folks who are further away. And the kind of criteria that we're hoping for is that there might be a desire for at least a component of this work to be accessible on a local basis, so that sometimes I'm going to say often instead of sometimes, this work is more meaningful when done in person. So if that's a position that you take, that's the kind of criteria that we would really like to get feedback on. Alicia?
Thanks, Maya, and thanks for compiling this. You said local or not. Sorry, I can't remember where we landed on one request that and so I'll just take your no as in we didn't land. Okay, and I couldn't remember.
We didn't land, but this is something that can be revisited on October 1st at our retreat.
Okay, so it's still out there. I just couldn't remember. Thanks, Maya. And the other thing is, in the past, I know we had a facilitator and one board member wasn't comfortable, and we changed facilitators, someone that had a relationship with. And I'm wondering if that'll be the same with this, if we'll have the ability to, as board members, say, you know, I'm not comfortable with that person, or I had a bad experience, and will that be taken into consideration as any facilitators? And by the way, I don't have that right now at all. I just know it happened, and I just want to get grounded on what are the ways we'll move forward with that, given that we have a history and we have a past practice of being able to have one person say, no, I'm not comfortable. We all want to be comfortable. So let's change facilitators. Thanks.
I appreciate that question. And I think that might be helpful in terms of the process with what Kirti just asked, which was to be informed as to who this is being sent to. That could help with that step, so that there's more organic process to the selection versus the selection and then the reselection. Again, this is only my second year on the board, so I've only witnessed that occur once. And my recollection is that the objection was because that person was the supervisor of the board member who objected.
No, there may have been miscommunication on that, but there was no connection. So in that respect. So okay. I just want to know, because I think we, like I said, we have now established on this board a past practice of being able to share our concerns or our uncomfortableness. I don't know if that's a word. Okay. And I just, we should go into it with that clarity that we're going to make this decision and we're going to all work together, or everybody gets a vote, yay or nay. I just want that clarity, Maya, and I will support whatever clarity you come up with. Okay.
Okay, that's fair. I'll work with Michelle on that. The difference of understanding of the supervisory role was not ever communicated to me. So where it landed, as far as I knew, was this person understood that person to be their supervisor. So I appreciate that input, and we will take that into consideration. Is there a long-standing history, Alicia, of people being, okay, so there's just a one-time occurrence?
Well, every board is different. And
yes.
So this board, minus our two newest members, made that decision. That's just why I want that clarity, Maya. Thanks. We don't have to, we can talk more if you want, but I just want you guys to make the decision, and then we'll go with it. Thanks.
Okay, I just wanted to understand the nature of the precedence, whether it was a one-time thing or a long-standing tradition of that occurring. But thank you. Michelle, I'm sure you're taking note of this also. Judy?
The only thing I wanted to add about that, whether it's a precedent or not, I think that if we are hiring an equity coach, that it's very important that everyone has a comfort level for it to be successful. So I think there should be an opportunity. I mean, it's sort of like a consensus model. If someone really couldn't work with someone, I think that needs to be communicated, as opposed to, I don't know that person, or I'm okay. But I think, you wouldn't just lightly say, I couldn't do that. But I think for work to be successful, it shouldn't be that situation. And in the end, that was the decision. It wasn't about a supervisor, it was a comfort level too. So I think that's important. I would put that forward as criteria.
Okay, I would prefer the details of that last time to be a discussion held at a time when that could either be addressed by the person who brought that forward, and since we
Well, let
don't.
me just say that's sort of, I even could leave it out. I just am saying, on its own, if we're going to work with an equity coach, it's important that no individual feels like they couldn't work with an individual. That's all.
I appreciate you sharing that criteria. Michelle?
I feel like with equity work, a component of that is being with discomfort. If everyone was comfortable all the time, and we all agreed on everything, then there wouldn't really be any point to existing as a board. So I'm not entirely sure what you mean by comfort, but I also don't know the details of what happened in the past. So I'm interested to hear as well.
Judy, do you want to share what you mean by comfort?
Oh, yeah, I agree, Michelle. I know that in the work itself, there's discomfort, but I just think there could be someone on the board that's been part of trainings with someone, or, that, and there could be a legitimate reason that they might not. I don't mean that anytime someone feels uncomfortable in the middle of the work, you're going to veto it. So I think we're selecting someone.
Does anyone else have criterion that they would like us to consider? Or suggestions? Or any of those different words, questions, comments? I just want to make sure I don't move along prematurely. And I want to reiterate, please forward to Rob Hess anyone who you would like this request for quotes to be sent to. And if we're going to be keeping track, I know Rob will keep track anyway, but then in short order, we will send out a list to all the folks who it was sent to, so that we can all be tuned into who is receiving that request for quotes. Alicia?
I just want to say I'm excited to get started on this. Thank you for getting us going on this. And I know it's never easy work to pick somebody, particularly for such a big and important job. So I appreciate you guys all that are working on it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alicia. Judy, do you have your hand raised by accident, or do you have another? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, unless there's anyone else who wants to say something, we'll move on to the next item for future action, which is approving superintendent evaluation process. This item is on the agenda to make sure that the board is aware that the evaluation process and timeline will need to be determined. As everyone here clearly understands, the time invested in providing meaningful feedback in the assessment of the superintendent's performance and the progress made in meeting the goals specified by the board for the superintendent is critical to the success of the district. If there is no objection at this stage, board leadership will work to develop a timeline and framework for Superintendent Dye's evaluation and bring it to the board for approval no later than the first regular board meeting in November, which is on November 2nd. The reason we'd like to do this sooner than later is that per Superintendent Dye's contract, we are hoping to do this sooner than later so that feedback can be offered and all resulting work can be influenced by our feedback. Alicia?
Thanks, Maya. So when you say bring it to the board, usually we do a work session so we can kind of, put our 2 cents versus sitting on that dais. And were you thinking work session? Did I miss that? Or were you thinking you'd bring it?
You didn't miss it because I didn't say it that way, but yes, work session is absolutely the most appropriate method of discussing the details of this, in my opinion.
All right,
And
great.
the work session, and then bringing it for a formal decision because we can't make those in the
All
work
right,
session.
just checking. Thanks, Maya. Sounds great.
No, I super appreciate that detail. Does anybody else have any suggestions or comments? I want to emphasize that Judy kindly forwarded the work that she did, I believe, in collaboration with Martina last year. So we have a model to work from the recent past, and that'll be very helpful so that we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel. Judy?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward. I assume at our work session, we'd have a timeline because I think my understanding is Superintendent Dye's contracts has the evaluation to be completed earlier than in past contracts. Is that correct? Is that March or end of March? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I would definitely necessitate us getting going soon.
That's great. Andy, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, not to dismiss the thrill of getting started soon, but I looked today just to make sure. And it is no later than May 31 or soon thereafter.
Thank you.
So
That
just for the
makes
sake of clarity, but sooner the better.
that makes sense.
Anybody else have questions or desires, hopes, visions, anything? Okay, then we will move on to the next item, which is consider revisions to board policy BCBA, student representatives to the board. So board policy BCBA currently states that one representative from each high school will participate as student board representative. We are proposing as the student voice committee that we revise that policy so 2 students from each high school can serve as student board representatives. I will pass it off to Michelle in one moment if she wants to give details or answer details about how we envision that 2-student teamwork working. But I want to emphasize that while this is an item for future action, the board could take action tonight, or you can wait till October 12th. Keep in mind that this committee has a desire to have student board reps selected and have an orientation scheduled prior to October 12th. So if we could vote tonight, and if people are amenable to that, that would be this committee's recommendation. Michelle, I don't know if you want to add something or just be available for questions as the chair of that subcommittee or committee.
I just wanted to add that the way that it's been done in the past, most student representatives are seniors, or all of them are, and they are extremely busy. They're also involved in lots of activities. And so we are opening this opportunity for students who are not necessarily in student government. And we would like to have 2, because then we could have possibly a freshman and a sophomore, and also a junior or a senior, and they could work together, and they could work either 1 year or 2 years and continue on with what they've learned in the past. And so each comprehensive high school would have 2 student representatives, and we're requesting that ECHO have 1. And that was our thinking.
Does anybody have any questions? And or would anybody like to make a motion to revise board policy BCBA to allow for 2 student board reps? Judy?
I'm sorry, I must be the question person tonight, but this is all new to me. This is all I've seen. So we're just voting to say there should be 2 reps, but where does all the detail about maybe one could be a senior, one could be a junior and stay on 2 years, and how they're selected, where does that come in to the, I mean, I haven't seen anything in writing, just a little bit that's been said tonight.
Right.
And so I really don't know. Right now, I'm just voting to have 2 reps, but
No, right now you would be voting to make it possible for there to be 2 reps.
okay. And
Because
then,
we're restricted to 1 according to our policy.
but is the process written down somewhere and articulated about how we're suggesting we're just leaving it up to schools as that we have in the past? I'm hearing a desire to change that, but I don't really see what that is.
I had mentioned in my opening remarks that it would be a collaborative effort between equity coordinators, student advocates, affinity group members and advisors, and administration as well. So it would be a collaborative effort. And we would, of course, welcome board input as well. And it would be an application process so that any student could apply.
So yeah, I've heard, I would like to see the process personally written down. And is there, same thing that we're asking about the equity, is there a criteria we're asking, or is it just asking them to make recommendations based on who they think might be? I mean, we should probably have a description of what we're asking them to do so they know what they're looking for.
Of course. And Michelle has worked in collaboration with our new communications director, Jenna, and they have a very thorough outline that I'm sure Michelle or Jenna would be happy to forward to you. I am happy to do so as well, but.
Well, I think you're asking us to vote on something that I really don't know what I'm voting on. That's all.
You're being asked to vote on allowing the policy to make space for 2 board reps to be selected.
No, I got that. But then will
Right.
we have input onto the process or see what it is? That's what I'm asking.
Right, and that's a different question than what we're hoping that we do with the revision to the policy, because BCBA does not outline the method by which students are selected. BCBA designates 1 representative to be selected. And what we're asking is to be able to have the opportunity to revamp our selection process so it can include 2 board members. And that's not to finalize the process in and of itself. If the board wants to vote on that and doesn't want to leave that to the purview of the Student Voice Committee, we can bring it back and postpone the onboarding of students. Last year we did it really late and we were hoping to avoid that. But we welcome that input if it feels necessary. But tonight we can't do anything with the suggestions that Jenna and Michelle have researched across the state of Oregon for best practices until we consider revising BCBA. So it's literally
the vote on the policy, but I guess I, for one, would like to see the process and what we're going to do, just to be
Yeah.
educated and that kind of thing before they get appointed. So I guess I would postpone it a little bit if it's gonna, if the.
Okay, I'm perfectly happy to share that information with you. And as Maya had mentioned, the current policy stipulates 1 student rep, and we are asking to change that. I'm not entirely sure why you would want to delay that detail.
I don't. I just said I would vote on that policy, but I would like to see the process. That's all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to clarify, because then I'm hearing we want to have people selected by our next meeting. And so that means I don't have any clue how they're being selected or slated.
So maybe we need a motion here that either somebody moves that we give the Student Voice Subcommittee purview to make the selection, or somebody moves to leave that purview to a full board vote. But I think that we need to make a decision, or we will find ourselves, as we did last year with our student reps being onboarded really far into the school year. So I suggest, and I'm happy to step aside as chair. I don't see Gordon, but I can pass it off to Kirthi and make the motion. But I see Alicia patiently has her hand raised.
I will be happy to make that motion so that we can have the discussion. Okay.
Thank
I
you.
move the acceptance of this motion to allow the policy to change so that we can recruit for 2 student board reps.
Okay, I hear that Alicia has moved to revise policy BCBA to allow for 2 student board reps to be selected, and Kirthi has seconded that. Is
Can I
there?
speak to the motion
Yes, I would welcome
as
that.
the maker of the motion? So I think it's really important that we give the committee this power. I like the idea of 2 reps because it's the foundation for you moving forward, as I see it, in your development of how you recruit. You got to know that you can get 2, right? I am really interested in making sure that you come back to us as a board, and I know it may prolong us getting our reps on, with the plan, so I can see it in writing in the application and all of that. I think it's important for me as a board member, but I really think it's important for our community to hear that, because as we have people that were, looking forward to that and maybe looking forward to it on their applications or whatever, it's that transparency piece. And so I'm happy. I'll be voting for this to give you that foundational piece. And then I'm looking forward, and I really want to see the final product and the application and how we're going to market it and all of that as soon as possible. Those are my 2 cents. Thanks.
So I am hearing 2 separate things, and I don't want to conflate them so that we make, it's okay. For my brain, I just want to do one at a time if possible. And if we want to do these as separate motions, that would be really helpful, because I hear 2 separate things, the revision of the
I
policy.
don't need a second motion on that. I'm just sharing my thoughts. So my motion stands. I'm happy to vote on it, on the policy change. I gave you my thoughts in addition. Thanks.
Okay, so let's I want to hear from Kirthi, but let's consider the discussion about the policy change, and then we can talk about the process afterwards, if that's okay. I'm a one-track minded kind of girl, I guess. Kirthi.
I want to say Alicia pretty much said exactly what I would have said, which is I would like to give the power to this committee to make those decisions, because I think that is the point of having the committee, to have delved into the issue, to look at it from all angles and to advise us. And if that's the angle that you are going with, I am happy to give more representation to that. But like, as with anything else, I would, also curious to see what that's going to look like and what it means for future things on there. Only for information's sake, it is also not going to change my vote on this particular decision on here. So Alicia, thanks for articulating what I would have said in any case. So that's my 2 cents as well.
Thank you, Kirthi. Do we have any more comments on the motion to revise policy BCBA to allow us to choose 2 representatives? Okay, all those in favor of revising board policy BCBA to allow the board to select 2 student representatives per high school, raise your hand and say aye and keep your hands raised. Okay, we now have a unanimous vote for this motion, but it's Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Maya Rabasa, Michelle Shu, Judy Newman, and Alicia Hayes, which reaches our quorum. We need 4. So thank you, everyone. Do we want to continue the conversation, or do we can we agree that we will forward you the very robust document that Michelle and Jenna developed after a lot of research, and then give the purview to the committee to move forward? Or I want to hear where people stand on that. And I suppose we need a motion for discussion if we're going to be making a formal decision. Judy?
I don't feel like I have to necessarily vote on the process, but I want to see it. And I'm sorry it wasn't in this board packet, because it would have made it easier to, I feel like I'm in the dark. So, and I think the public is also in the dark, to Alicia's point. So I think, are you saying our next meeting is the 12th?
I can say that the intention and the proposal as it stands includes robust advertising of the shift in the method, robust communication with building administration, as well as our equity team, who we just had the privilege of meeting. It involves some pretty creative tactics, like posting things with QR codes so students can easily access the steps by which they can pursue this opportunity. So, and I don't know, Michelle, if you have anything else that you want to add in regards to reassuring that any feeling of darkness will be very quickly illuminated. I appreciate, Judy, what you're saying about it not being in the board packet.
And I'm not questioning, I totally believe you're gonna, it's great. I'm really happy you did the research. I'd like to read it myself and understand too. But
right.
the thing I'm most interested in is what's the criteria for selecting? Are we gonna draw names out of a hat? Do we have who's making that decision? What's the criteria for selecting students? You know, before, every high school had its own method. And so I don't know exactly, you know, you say there's a description about what students should do. Those are really the things that I'm really interested in seeing and understanding.
Right. And I think that we need to decide if we need to vote on those things, or if you can feel comfortable knowing that at the close of this meeting, it'll be forwarded to you. Michelle, do you want to add? And I also see Alicia's hand is raised.
I really don't have much to add, except that you know, we're trying to encompass more voices, and voices of students who we don't ordinarily hear from, by lowering barriers. So yeah, it's not anything complicated. The criteria is that they are a 4J student, and it's that they're eager to participate, that they have something to share with us and they would like to participate. And I will share it with you tomorrow. I apologize for not having it completed sooner. I was out of town, but now I'm back and you will see it tomorrow.
Thank you, Michelle. I really feel comfortable you will. I just want the public to be able to see it. And I would anticipate we're going to get lots of applications, and most people are going to be applying because they're eager and they're 4J students. So then where do we go from there if we have 10 times the applications for the slots? What then will be the criteria to select? Who's
Yeah,
on?
you're asking questions I can't answer. This is something new, and we're prepared to review every application, and with the help of a lot of other staff and also administrators, we're confident that we can choose 2 students who will well represent their school.
In regards to the increase in interest, I very much hope that you're right. And I also think that increasing our ability to select 2 will help with that. There's been lots of times when one was selected with a very close runner-up, and it sure would have been nice to be able to offer it to 2.
No, I'm really delighted with the expanded number. I really last year wanted to have an advisory group with even more students. So I have no problem with that. I'm just wanting to really understand that next step. So I don't know, maybe you could report back at the next meeting about it or something, because I think the public deserves to hear as well.
So can I make a suggestion?
Yes, please.
So given the time between now and our next meeting, I am very comfortable with Michelle and the team sending to us your recruitment material, and how, I'll be curious to see the QR code and all of that, and to get out there and recruit. I doubt we're going to make a decision so that they're ready to go on the 12th without criteria, because without criteria and my kid doesn't make it and I come and push back on you, you're going to have criteria. You just are, because I know you guys. I mean, you have to give that to your team that's making the decision. I'm sure you'll get to that point. So I just want you to know, for me, I am comfortable getting the material and you going ahead and recruiting, but I really want time on the agenda so we can kind of all get to know this and be able to be supportive, and also talk intelligently with our friends when they ask us, should my kid apply? Or and also a timeline. And if that doesn't fit the timeline, I'm willing to reconsider my thinking so that we can fit the timeline, so we can get the students seated, because I don't want to go along like we did last time. Does that make sense? I just want I'm happy with that. I don't think we need a motion, but I do need it brought back, and with for me, and with the criteria, and also send out before with timelines and such.
So
that's what I would need.
I understand the willingness to be a little bit loose about it, but I'm wondering if maybe we do need a motion so that we are all in agreement, or in full understanding of what we are agreeing to. I don't want to.
If you'd be more comfortable with the motion, I'll be happy to attempt one.
I think that would be
just looking at my other compatriots here, if they would go along with it, because I hate being defeated. So my motion would be that the teams, that we go ahead and start recruitment for the student, because now we can have 2, for the student representatives, with the understanding that the team will send to us all the information about recruitment, how they'll go, the process, including being able to hear about the criteria we'll use to determine who is chosen, how you'll do that, that piece. It's not a great motion, but move forward. You're like, you want to try it, Kirthi? Oh, you're seconding my.
Kirthi's seconding it, but to clarify, does that mean that we do not actually select until after we have come back on the 12th and shared with you all of that information?
I would like us to just pause that extra week or so. Yes, I think that will be helpful. I think it's helpful to get it out to the public. So thank you for that clarification. I know that puts you back 2 weeks, but I really want us to be recruiting 3 weeks. I really want us to be recruiting now. And maybe if we all get that information, Maya, I'll be glad to say we can, yeah, sorry, I was thinking we do it over email. But yes, that does put us back 3 weeks.
So just to
maybe, let me just ask, maybe, let me put that forward. If somebody wants to shift it, I'm willing to hear about it. Okay.
I just want to restate the motion then, which is that we agree to have the recruitment of student board reps begin with the understanding that the full board will receive the revamped approach to selecting board reps, and that we will come back to share the criterion by which they will be selected, with the intention of having board reps selected and in place by November 2nd.
Thank you, Maya. That's very clear. Yes.
Are you still seconding that? Okay. Is there any discussion? I guess the only thing I have to say is I'm willing to agree, but I am feeling a little bit of panic about getting these board members in place. And November feels really late. That leaves me a little bit concerned.
We only have one board meeting in October.
No, but between the two board meetings, we have 1 week, which leaves it very difficult to select and train in 1 week.
Well, we could select and then have a work session scheduled on that next week to, if you have everything reviewed and all the applications in, maybe
I think
it's not realistic.
I think it's unfair to tell students you've been selected and in 2 days you need to come to a training in order to participate in the meeting the next day or that same day. I wouldn't want that, and I don't have a plate of classes and homework to contend with. So it's the proposal is to get all that information and delay the placement of the students. All those in favor?
I don't know what choice I have.
All right, well, I see 4 hands raised for in favor. I see Alicia Hayes, Michelle Shu, Judy Newman, and Kirthi Hasija Hoffman.
I'm sorry, Michelle. Yeah.
It's okay. It gives us a quorum. All those opposed, I'll vote opposed because I'm eager for those students to join us.
And Maya, if there is anything we could do, like a work session, if we're going to do a work session, can they come to that? As you look forward, you've got dates now. I will do whatever it takes to get them sooner if you can come up with something.
I mean, I think we are all pretty clear that they will not be joining us until our November 2nd meeting based on this.
Okay. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but okay.
Off the top of my head.
But okay. Well, they'll get some good training. They won't be rushed.
The vote, the motion passes 4-1.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
No,
we're hindered by the October schedule. And there's unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the next thing on the agenda are meeting dates. The board is scheduled for a board retreat on Saturday, October 1st from 4 to 8 via Zoom. And our next regular board meeting is October 12th. And finally, we have suggestions by the board for consideration of items at a future meeting. Are there any items to add? Okay, in that case, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned at 9:01 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.